Well, hello, I'm Rupal Ismin. I'm the director of the Sydney Knowledge Hub. Our mission is to help researchers connect with the outside world. And one of the ways that we do that is by supporting researchers on their commercialization journey by organizing events like these. We also run a co-working space where we have industry partners like Archer Materials and Gradient Institute, as well as early stage IP heavy businesses from the university. Perhaps one of you on the call today can use this place as your primary place of work. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Gadigal land and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers joining us today. So thank you all for joining us for Commercializing Your Research in Digital Health. This is a first of a few events that we're holding over the next 2 months on job opportunities and commercializing digital health. We're going to be deep diving into some other topics as well throughout the year with similar sessions on areas such as advanced manufacturing, smart sensing, circular economy, and quantum. The journey to commercialization for researchers is a road that's less defined than, say, perhaps grant funding. And while it's not always easy to navigate, the university has a lot of resources to help support and seed researchers with their ideas. And certainly the broader ecosystem, as we'll see today, has a lot to offer in terms of support for truly breakthrough discoveries. You'll hear today about some of those resources. We have 4 speakers, each will chat for about 15 minutes. We may have some time for questions. We'll see how we go. So if you have them, please pop them in the chat. And I'm sure that someone will be either glad to answer it here or get back to you if we don't have time. After this, either today or Monday, because the orchestrator of this event, Sarah Lacroix, is crook, but is kindly still orchestrating from the back end. Someone will be sending out an email on some follow-ups and the presentations today. So today we have Ben Lindsay, who's the program director at Incubate, our on-campus accelerator that has alumni such as BioScout, DetectEdX, and CarePac, who are all current members of the Sydney Knowledge Hub. Followed by that, I'll lead a discussion with Dr. Annie Mccauley, founder of TalkiPlay, helping young children develop language. Last, we'll have Dr. Grace Lethlean from ANDHealth, a national support system funded by MTP Connect and Launch Victoria, to help digital businesses commercialize. But first up, we have Dr. Melissa Mail, commercial theme leader in the post-awards team. Mel helps researchers at the university through their intellectual property and tech transfer process, or the process of getting the IP out of the university. So over to you, Mel.
Sure, thanks, Rupal. So I'll start by sharing my screen. Terrific. So what I'm going to do today is give you a quick overview in relation to who we are, what we do at the university, and the various types of support that is offered. Given the nature of the speakers to follow, I do have some points in there as to what we see as the outlook for the digital health, especially from where we sit at the university, but I'll just leave them in my notes and I'll share these, so feel free to have a look afterwards. So as mentioned, I'll talk about who we are, the commercialization team, the process at the university to getting to that stage that Rupal talked to, that it's something that can leave the university, and lastly, I'll touch upon the internal support. So the aim of our group is basically to nurture innovation and to see technology be transferred into the community from the lab bench. So the commercialization team consists of a group of dedicated professionals. We undertake evaluations of technology coming through and disclosed to us. We provide specific advice with respect to intellectual property questions or issues. We provide outreach and education programs such as this. And we also promote collaboration with industry, the Sydney Knowledge Hub, Incubate, and others to increase the richness of the commercialisation ecosystem in not only New South Wales, but also Australia. So what really gives me the credibility to speak to you today, effectively it's our ongoing success at the University of Sydney with respect to commercialisation. So this is a quick graph that was reported in 2019 based on outputs in terms of royalties, trademarks and licenses. You will see there that there's 2 universities leading the charge, and that's Monash, and they have Monash IVF, which contributes to the numbers that you see, and also the University of Queensland. And obviously they've had huge success with the Gardasil vaccine, and that's what increases their numbers. So one aspect of success is obviously how much income it provides, but something more tangible to the ecosystem is the number of startups that are generated each year. And as you can see by the results here, the University of Sydney is far exceeding the rest of the GO8 in terms of that initial stage, which is most critical to creating the long-lasting ecosystem and network of individuals. So that's a bit about how our track record, so to speak. So now I'd just like to quickly touch upon what the process is. So if you're a University of Sydney staff, student, affiliate or visitor, we have certain processes in place that will enable you to disclose the technology to us and enable us to take it forward. So the process at the university, it does look quite complex, but it starts off before you contact us. So one of the key things that we find when going through the process is that record keeping is essential. So no matter what area you're in, it's making sure that you're storing your material properly. You have the appropriate agreements in place, whether they be CDAs or otherwise, and you manage confidential and sensitive information. So in the research portfolio, we can assist you with that in terms of helping you get those specific contracts in place to make sure that you're not missing out on an opportunity later on by having inadvertent disclosures early. What we then ask for in the second circle there is a confidential disclosure in relation to the technology. So this is important to enable us to understand what you've generated, what's unique about it, and furthermore, what the advantages are and how you envisage to take it forward. Off the back of the disclosure, we do a whole suite of assessments in terms of the technology, the market, existing competitors, customers. We will also have an independent patentability assessment undertaken before we make a decision as to whether to protect and/or commercialise technology. Because for the likes of software, in some instances, patent protection is very difficult to obtain depending on the jurisdiction, but that doesn't prevent us from commercialising the technology. Once we've gone through the due diligence process, we feel that we're in a really good position to be able to take that forward. And we have multiple routes in order to do that. So in terms of commercialisation, we have 2 key commercialisation partners of the university, and we also have the opportunity to go out to others. So our commercialisation partners are Uniseed, which is Australia's longest running VC for research organisations. It's a $50 million fund with a $20 million follow-on, and we've had recent success with the generation of Ageris, which is a agricultural-based AI robotic platform. The other commercialisation partner is IP Group. IP Group focus in similar areas as to Uniseed, and they're a much larger fund of 200 million, sorry, and they are all of their catchment, so to speak, is the GO8 plus Auckland. So we have the wealth of input from both Uniseed and IP Group in relation to technology coming through the university and the ability to generate startup companies and syndicate funding rounds. Coming back to what we can do at the university in the commercialisation team, I will spend the last 5 minutes briefly talking about the support that we provide. So the main touch points that we have with staff, students and others at the university are through the Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Medicine and Health, and the Faculty of Science. We also support the other schools and faculties. However, we find that majority of the technology being disclosed to us comes from those three main faculties. So as mentioned earlier, we provide support and advice with respect to intellectual property. We do agreement negotiations, whether it be licenses, assignments, or even research agreements where there may be some difficult aspects with respect to IP and or publication clauses. We can assist academics review manuscripts prior to publication to ensure that any inventions are captured and appropriately dealt with before publication. So effectively a one-stop shop when it comes to IP and any questions that you might have. In addition to the advice that we can provide, we also offer a proof of concept fund, and these are internal grants of up to $80,000 to help in that initial stage generate the data that's needed to support filings and attract commercial partners. And as you can see on the slide, this fund has been increasing. We did have a huge round in 2019, and that was off the back of some exits that we had based on previous arrangements. But it's something that's increasingly growing, and we have a lot of support too. And finally, I'm excited to mention a project that we've just got off the ground, and this is through the hard work of Alex Carpenter in the University of Sydney Business School. And we have assisted with an entrepreneurship project where some of the key technologies that we have with the university, we're giving students the ability to effectively learn the processes required to create new ventures with real, tangible, hands-on experience. And we think this will contribute to the knowledge of the ecosystem moving forward. And with that, I'll probably hand back to Rupal. There are a couple of slides with respect to my outlook on the digital health. If you've got any questions at all, my details are at the end of the slide. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. We do have a few more minutes, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. Otherwise, Mel, we might have time for some of your the digital outlook, if you're keen for that.
Okay.
No questions, but why don't you go ahead? We have about 5 more minutes.
Sure. So I think from what we've seen in terms of being able to do deals and interact in the wider community, the key considerations for digital health that stand out for us are effectively data privacy and confidentiality, how medical devices are regulated and the different regulations depending on jurisdictions, which varies more than what you would expect in other areas, the registration requirements, whether it be FDA or otherwise, and finally, I think one of the most important aspects is understanding the user versus who would be the one transacting with the material. And so that's about the market access and also reimbursement. Are you working in with one of the reimbursement schemes? So obviously there was the report in terms of outlining the strategy moving forward. And you can see that some of these key considerations are also highlighted there. Closer to home, I think there's 5 main challenges that are faced. There's access to capital, and that's no matter which industry you're in, so it's kind of technology agnostic. There are, though, limited investors with a specific mandate with respect to digital health. And effectively the flow-on effect is that it makes it more difficult to attract talent and skills, which has a flow-on effect to the implementation and uptake. And finally, in terms of trying to get the technology from the very early stage, it's that lack of digital health specific grant programs to see if something has an initial or the initial validation. So yes, we provide the CDIP proof of concept, but we need something on a much broader scale if we're really going to grow this area and sector. So I think
that's great. We have a question from Corinne, which is about data management. So is it worth meeting with your team to make sure that they have the adequate processes in place about data management?
So yes, and there's various facilities that the university offers in terms of technology that can assist with data management. So we can definitely reach out to you and talk to you about that, because one thing that we find later on when doing deals is that some of the key information is missing, and it's just a matter of good process to have everything documented accordingly.
So, you know, would Corinne be able to kind of reach out to you to then connect you to the right folks? Great.
Sure.
Her second question was, when the work is part of a PhD project, who owns the IP? And does that mean that the whole team, including the student, needs to meet with the full team?
That's a great question. So in terms of ownership of intellectual property, that's spelt out in the IP policy. So there are different provisions with respect to that of students compared to staff. And what I'd recommend is getting everyone on board and having a discussion with the wider team. I wouldn't be excluding anyone.
Great. There's a question on the Q&A chat that says, is it suggested to not publish papers on your digital health software prototypes before IP protection then?
Always a good question, always something that comes up in terms of publishing and or patenting. One of the difficulties faced with software is the ever-changing landscape with respect to patentability, and that changes based on decisions of the courts, primarily led out of the US. So at the moment, we're in a state of flux. So I would probably recommend that you seek to see if there is patentable subject matter and go down that route prior to publication to preserve any opportunities that you may have. They can happen within close timing, because there's a misconception that, oh, if I patent, then I won't be able to publish for 6 months to a year to further on, and that's not necessarily the case. So if you have specific questions, please feel free to get in touch and I can walk you through the process.
We have a question about where should students first go if they're looking to copyright IP for a digital health program?
That's a great question. Maybe I'll follow up. I think that's Jennifer, because I'm not too sure exactly which angle you're looking at there. So I want to be able to provide you with the right information.
And then we have, in regards to validation of the innovation, is the tested validated in Australian context or global context? Is it better to test in an Australian or global context?
There's benefits to having validation and, say, obtaining TGA approval in Australia compared to overseas, if that's what the question is focused for. It ultimately depends on what your end goal and your aim is with respect to the technology and output. Is it something that has a global focus and actually would mean there would be it would make better commercial sense to validate overseas as compared to Australia? It comes down to the specific business and what it's seeking to achieve.
Great, Mel, these answers are so concise that I think we can answer the final one, which is, what would you do, what would you avoid publishing about digital health programs?
Depends what those programs are aimed at doing. So because digital health is so broad and it's not necessarily encompassing one thing, because one could argue that some of your smart devices are digital health in some respect. So obviously that would have a different implication as compared to training manuals or the like. So I'm happy to take that one offline as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mel. That was great. I think that, you know, kind of seeing that knowledge exchange and kind of the process is really helpful to see on one screen. And I think that, you know, a couple things that people aren't aware of is that proof of concept fund, which is really an amazing resource that the university has to offer. So thank you very much. And IP, of course, IP and funding are just one step of getting your research out there. And if you're on the startup pathway, you also need to understand the market, develop your business plan, nail your pitch, and of course, a host of other things. So next we have Ben Lindsay, Program Director at Incubate. He'll give you some advice and tell you about the Incubate program. Ben.
Thank you, Rupal. Let me just quickly, just like Mel had first up, share my screen. So can you see that? The slides? Perfect. Well, look, just firstly, everyone. So the terminology I'll use will be more broadly speaking to all of digital health, medical devices and therapeutics. So if there's any confusion regarding that, Grace, who's talking later on, is going to be breaking that down. So what I'm going to be doing more is focusing on the Incubate program, ProtoX, and how we can help your idea irrespective of where it kind of falls in those definitions. So a little secret about me as we get started, even though I deal with a lot of startups, a lot of different ideas, I do love medical and health technology the most. There's no lies to it. So I'm the program manager of Incubate. I've been here since class 15. I'm actually trained in medical device commercialization by New South Wales Health. I'm the founder of my own medical device startup, which is operating now internationally. I studied here at the University of Sydney. I've got a boring certification making me a lead auditor for medical device quality management systems. And, you know, I've won awards, not just for my own devices, but other things through the university in designing and commercializing medtech. My own medical tech, so just so you understand, I've been where you are, even though it's not digital, it's a bit of it's just a class on medical device. I've taken it through clinical trials. I've published clinical studies. We've got more clinical trials happening around the globe, and it can be found on the legs of amateur athletes all the way through to professional kind of stars around the world. And I've tapped into all the support New South Wales government can really offer. So if you ever reach out to me, I've been there, I've done that, and I'll be able to help you map that out. And if I don't know the answer regarding, you know, the commercialization of your research, you've just met Mel, so that's or Melissa rather. So that's another good touch point to have. So one of the key things I'd love to highlight is that medical and health tech, you know, as your digital health rather, you often have a different challenge to usual startups, right? And that, you know, when we look at the business model canvas, which, you know, we often show a startup when they're first starting, is the startup usually starts here. So, you know, they've got a customer segment they're looking to target, right? So for some of you, you are going to feel it, you're going to fall here, which is great. You know, you might just want to be helping doctors, a certain group of patients, and you don't really know what you're doing yet. And to do that, you would talk to that customer segment, identify their problem, work out if they're willing to pay enough to build a solution that's worth making, and then you'd sell it to them. Now that's very oversimplified, but that's kind of the gist of what you would do. But I'm well aware that most of you are going to have technology that you're already working on. So you're not going to want to change your idea too much for a particular customer segment. We're going to be starting here with your IP. So if you're starting there with your IP, it's a bit of a different pathway for you to market. You take your IP, you're looking for a customer segment, you're looking for a problem, you know, how much they'll pay to solve that problem. And then you've got the big hairy question, which is, does your solution, does your digital health app, you know, what you've been working on all this time, actually effectively solve the problem? And then ask yourself, is that a viable business model? So you're going to start with your IP, talk to customers, you're going to develop your value propositions. Are they going to pay enough? It's going to develop your revenue streams, and then all the other questions that formulate your business model. Now, the unfortunate thing for you is if you start with an idea or if you start with an app, it can be a bit more difficult because you've got to figure out where your puzzle piece fits. But it's no less can be great to find those customers. So good news. For those of you out there who've worked with it in the past, you know, customers and finding customers with your IP is ingrained in medical product design. So broadly speaking, across all digital health, digital medicine and digital therapeutics, you know, in this design, one of the first things you need to do is talk to users to develop those user needs. Now, you know, if you are doing a digital medical device or a digital therapeutic, it's actually compulsory if you want to register and get approvals. But for those of you just building a digital health app, it's just a great practice to have. So identifying the unmet user needs, you know, is extremely important to developing your design inputs. So that is pretty much where Incubate and these programs that I'm going to be talking about today will help. So it's about taking your idea and trying to identify those unmet customer needs that your idea solves. So a bit about Incubate. Incubate was founded in 2012 and is proudly supported by the University of Sydney's Department of Vice-Chancellor in Education and the Innovation Hub. Now, our goal is to help foster, grow and launch successful startups with innovative solutions within the University of Sydney community. Now, we've got a few programs that are designed to help teach you the foundational skills of understanding the commercialization process and successfully launching your startup. So the first and the flagship program, which most of you might know about, is the Incubate Accelerator. So in 2019, the Incubate Accelerator was awarded the Startup Accelerator of the Year. So that's just based over on level 4 of the Wentworth building. So just above the kebab shops on the corner of Lethlean Ave and City Road. So we've won various awards and our goal is to fund students, alumni and researchers. We take no equity stake in our program. So that is the differentiation across all the other accelerators we've seen around Australia. We don't take any equity and any student from any background is welcome to apply. So in that accelerator program, you do get an initial investment. You get access to workshops and mentors, and key workshops for some of you would be, you know, given by leaders in finance, sales, marketing, IP law, and much more. So in that accelerator program, we've helped 125 startups accelerate off the back of the program. It's actually now $41 million in investment for those startups, and we've created over 400 jobs. So Detected X now over at the Knowledge Hub. So Professor Patrick Brennan was in class 15. So the first class I was there. So, you know, a little bit of a testimonial from Patrick. So the university is extremely fortunate to have the Incubate program. Our focus, which we're seeing here, Patrick kind of giving a review on, is helping him transform his academic idea into a commercial reality. The problem is with the Incubate Accelerator program is, for everyone on this call, the applications for the next program in 2022 won't be opening until late 2021. So in the meantime, we've actually got two streams. We've got ProtoX researchers and ProtoX startups occurring later this year. There's going to be 2 programs running. So in ProtoX, we're going to help you take your idea and basically develop a roadmap to market. So we're going to help you identify customers, what are their needs, you know, where does your research actually sit commercially, how valuable is it in dollars, and then in addition to that, you get access to mentors who are going to help get your startups Incubate Accelerator ready. The format of ProtoX is quite easy. It's fortnightly goals and check-ins. It really does put the the load onto you. You've really got to go out there and put the effort in. And what we help you do is just facilitate it, guide you, and put you in touch with the necessary mentors. You know, for example, the reason you need to do a lot of the legwork, and actually Melissa pointed it out before, I took note of it, highlighting that, you know, the person who purchases the product isn't necessarily the person who's using it. So you actually need to talk to the full value chain, and it requires a lot of effort. And that's what we're there to do. So we'll help you determine who your users are of the product, the choosers and the buyers, if they're different people, who's going to potentially block the commercialization of your product, who's going to influence it, and who are the gatekeepers. So the gatekeepers, for example, in a lot of industries is something like the receptionist or the executive assistant, often gets neglected. And for the startups who've learned to capture the influence of the gatekeeper, they've actually had a very easy time talking to the right people. So as mentioned, ProtoX is customer focused to help you determine the value of the problem your digital health technology is solving for a particular segment. So in those programs, the Incubate Accelerator will look at the whole business model, but if any of you wish to apply, we'll be looking at the customer segments, at the value propositions for your health app, and then also the potential revenue streams. So Relievables, one of our ProtoX alumni, we managed to give her the confidence, opportunity, and motivation to conduct those first customer interviews. I know they can be very daunting to go out there and talk to people. So that is what we're there to do. You know, the first stream we had last year focusing on researchers, we've got Ed from Codex Research Technology. So Ed was in ProtoX last year and is now in the flagship accelerator. This year, for those of you who are interested, we've got 2 streams. We've got the June to August stream and the September to December streams. It also runs in parallel to non-researchers. So if you are concerned about where you might fit in the researcher stream, don't panic. We do have another stream which runs parallel to it. And just to highlight now that the ProtoX, so we can help you validate your idea and then basically hit the ground running in the accelerator program, is now a prerequisite for the accelerator. So expressions of interest are now open, so please do reach out. Any questions are more than welcome. So make sure you email me to arrange a sit down if you would like to come over to the Wentworth building. I'm always happy to hear ideas and hear where you would like to take them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. Feel free to pop any questions through. We have one. What's the difference between ProtoX researchers and the other one?
Students. Right, great.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great question. So researchers and startups. When I say startups in that term, I mean, there's an analogy out there by the founder of LinkedIn is you throw all your parts off a cliff and try and build a plane on the way down before you hit the ground. So they are in an industry where they get to operate very fast. Researchers, unfortunately, we don't get to operate so quickly. You know, as Melissa's highlighted, there's some steps that you need to follow with the university, for example, but then also in more complex industries, so quantum computing and then medical technology, it is a slower, longer path to market. So what we've done, in addition to finding different mentors for the different streams, is we want to put you with people who are operating at a similar speed. So it can sometimes be frustrating watch a startup go out and talk to 500 students because students are their customers and you got to talk to one neurosurgeon. You know, but one neurosurgeon is a lot harder, in my opinion, than 500 university students. So does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Ben. I think that, you know, bringing some structure into how you think about your next steps of your business is really important, and understanding, you know, that business canvas and the customer conversations will help you understand what your real problem is instead of kind of not knowing what to do next, or your own confidence. You know, I think it's great that Incubate has a mentor component of the program, because one, not only does that help you get connections, but it also adds a level of external accountability to your next step, someone else to answer to than your own motivation and your own fear.
Definitely.
So thank you very much, and we'll be including the links and so forth that Ben mentioned. Ben, also perhaps a deck in the email that we send out in the next business day or so. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Well, next I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Annie Mccauley. She's the founder of TalkiPlay, which is a digital app and a hardware component that helps young children learn languages. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions for her, so I'll try to kind of leave some room at the end for some questions from you all. But hello, Annie, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. And first off, to demonstrate to the listeners what a great elevator pitch is, can you give us the elevator pitch of TalkiPlay?
Yeah, I'd love to, but I'm going to pre-warn, since COVID lockdowns, I have not pitched for over a year now, but I'm going to give it a go. It's been a while. All right, so I do something a bit unique, and it's definitely not as a researcher. So I'm pitching as myself instead, and it's been very successful. We've won awards. I'll explain the awards later, but here we go. All right, I'm Dr. Annie Mccauley, the founder and CEO of TalkiPlay. A few years ago, I was slumped over my afternoon coffee, holding back the tears of exhaustion as my toddler lay on the floor, throwing yet another tantrum. She was struggling, and so was I. She was struggling to communicate with me, and she was frustrated. Unfortunately, 1 in 5 young kids struggle to communicate as they have a language delay. And these kids have poor expected educational outcomes for the whole of their life. I want to close the gap for children like my daughter by giving them access to a research-supported daily practice tool to improve their language skills. I called it TalkiPlay. It makes the toys and furniture in your home come to life. They talk, they sing, and they play games. Encourages kids to engage in early sounds, words, and literacy. TalkiPlay has experienced rapid growth in the preschool market in Australia, and since launching internationally, we've been accessed in 11 countries. TalkiPlay is increasing the global opportunity in language development so that every child, like my daughter, can thrive.
That was fantastic. You know, just a couple of bits of the structure on that pitch was, you know, you started off with the problem and essentially like why you should care about the problem, why it was so personal to you, and then the solution, of course, and why we should, you know, showing a little bit of your traction, why we should care about your particular solution. So that was great, even though you were out of practice, which is pretty amazing for a startup to be out of practice on pitching. So you must be doing something right. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so my background, I'm a medical researcher. I did a PhD in the ophthalmology department at Melbourne Uni. I worked on biotriage, particularly focusing in diabetic retinopathy, so preventing blindness. I've always worked out of hospitals, so working with patients, you know, looking at innovation and ways to help with patient triage. Then I went on to work at the Children's Hospital, and then was recruited to the Alfred, which is the biggest, and I worked there in emergency and trauma as a fellow.
Mm-hmm. Great. And how did that lead you to where you are right now? You know, were you kind of bringing, I guess, is there a connection between your research background and kind of where you are with TalkiPlay?
Yes and no. It's a really good question. So I definitely wouldn't have invented TalkiPlay if I didn't have my research background. The conceptual idea for TalkiPlay is about the way it's an IoT development product. So we do things that are very cute, but it actually works in a way that cells would communicate to one another. Mm-hmm. Being a big data scientist, I'm able to do all of our big data analysis in the background. That, you know, is a really big benefit for any health company setting up. And obviously, we run research studies as well. We run them like a clinical trial study, of which I've managed many. So I think that my experience in that was really important, while the actual technical focus of language development was definitely not my area of expertise. So we brought people on in that area. You know, but in many ways, me being a research academic, being busy, working huge hour days actually was one of the reasons that we got into this situation in the first place. I had 2 young children working huge hours, and then I have a child that had extra needs. And that put me under, you know, a situation where, you know, I had to come up with a solution for my home life. And it actually turned out to be the most innovative thing that I've come up with.
Mm-hmm. And we can't, I don't know if you have everything by you, but can you show us what it looks like, what the TalkiPlay looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, so we interconnect with an app, so it's very easy to use, but in preschools, we use this little guy. This is our TalkiPlayer, and it connects to all sorts of things, like, for instance,
Uh-oh.
it sings toilet songs. This one's very popular. We also have a digital version that is not device. So our digital version is QR codes. Mm-hmm. And we've just done this game recently because so many children missed out on their kinder year and they haven't learnt their ABCs. So this was very popular in the last couple of months. And so they're able to access it without any infrastructure set up. Which has been very popular with a lot of countries around the world.
We sadly missed some of that because there was a bit of a frozen situation. But perhaps if we do it again, you might want to turn off your video, but I think we should be okay right now. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, the really early stages of your business where, you know, it was you with an idea, you know, probably doing a little bit of research on the solution. How'd you find your team? How'd you find the people around you? How'd you kind of find your blind spots and, I guess, sell this idea to bring on the early people who were just as invested in this idea as you are?
Yeah, that was actually quite difficult. I think if I'd done it within the university, it would have been very beneficial because I was already working in a team. For me, because I'd come up with it outside of the university, I didn't quite have the same support, although I was at Monash University and they were extremely supportive in terms of me starting this research innovation on the side. I didn't know how, though, to turn what I developed. So I had developed the product. I didn't know how to turn that into something that people could access. So that scalability. So I saw something that popped up in Smart Company that I follow online. It's a great newsletter. And it said, she starts, you know, was the accelerator for women, and that you could apply and they'd help you turn your idea, you know, into a scalable company. So I applied, and it was an incredible thing to do, going through an accelerator, because all of a sudden you got given a team. So I had a tech team, I had a project manager given to me. I worked with this team for 6 months and we developed the product further. I also had classes that I had to attend, you know, quite frequently around business management, how to read a P&L, all sorts of stuff that you just don't learn as a researcher. Even, you know, like I thought I knew pretty well from doing grants, but yeah, it's just very different. So I'm really glad that I did that in such a deep, intense, and very fast way, because that really scaled up, moving it just from something that was an innovative product into something that could be a company.
Yeah, that's great. And so what does your team look like now? Is it just you? Do you have a team around you?
Yeah, I have a team of 14. And so we were mainly all based in Melbourne and Sydney, but we've started picking up team members internationally now because of our international traction. So we have to have people on the ground to help if something happens. So we've got people in Europe, so in Austria. We've got someone started up in Pakistan recently because we're not just in we originally thought we'd be in Australia, England, the US. Predominantly we were English speaking as a focus in our business plan. We were wrong, and we needed to think more globally. So that's been really great to push. We've also were predominantly all office-based before. So we had a really cool, funky office in a big warehouse in Collingwood in Melbourne. But, you know, online work, people internationally, we've really become, you know, quite dynamic in the way that we work, which has given us a lot of flexibility too, to find people that are happy to work or want to work out of the 9 to 5.
You know, you have a software and a hardware component of your business. Can you tell us a little bit about how you designed the hardware? You know, both kind of the design and then the manufacturing process, you know, both early days and I guess as you're scaling, you know, how that has changed, and, you know, particularly in a COVID world where, you know, supply chain is a little tougher to manage. Yeah, can you tell us about some of the challenges in your experience with the hardware component of your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So hardware is hard. And I think so many people told me that in the beginning. And I thought, like, it's fine. Like, I'll be able to manage it. But hardware is really hard. And if you can make it software, it's a lot easier. Hardware is good for patentability, though, and I think that's a real strength that we have, and definitely helped us get funded. In terms of how do we make the hardware, we started with off-the-shelf components. So I think one of the things I really learned that was quite different to the research approach was doing something quick. You know, this idea of an MVP is not about producing a 2-year-long development for a piece of hardware. It's about saying, how can I test proof of concept with what I can find around me, and how can I do it, go in and find out everything that's wrong and everything that's right, and then do it again with the next stage. So what we were doing, that we had products in market straight away with preschools, things that were off the shelf that were already registered. We then designed our app to integrate with these hardware products, and it was a lot easier because they were already registered. Mm-hmm. In the background, I built up an engineering team once I had funding, and the engineering team worked on our own design and product. And it was very hard to do, to have a product in market and developing another product at the same time. But it's definitely worthwhile, because what we've done is come out with something that we know the users want. You know, we didn't invest time and money in something that, you know, we hadn't already proved the proof of concept for. Mm-hmm. And I really recommend that approach, because yeah, as quick as you can get something into market, into users' hands, the better you learn if they like it or if you're on the right track.
Yeah, great. We have a couple of questions. What makes you say that we were wrong to have an English-speaking focus? What were some of the challenges as an English-speaking developer for reaching non-English-speaking countries?
Oh, it's still a challenge. I think that setting up, you know, I did it in research, but I think even more so in a company, I set up assumptions. I set up assumptions because I had to define our target market. You know, I had to define a focus for it. I couldn't just go in and think I'm going to focus on the whole world, because it was unrealistic to get investment that way. We went in with a very, you know, focused market with just bringing one language, which is English, even though I want to deliver a platform of languages. I think having that focus has been really important, because it meant we've actually built it and had proof of concept and customers. But I really, in that assumption, I missed out a lot of the rest of the world. And I think if I was to go probably back again, I would have taken my assumptions a bit broader first and really thought and tested the global market rather than just thinking on Australia. And Australia is a very small market.
Can you tell us about your first non-Australian customer, or how you got into your first market? Like, what was the opportunity that led you to the next market?
Well, we started to see original traction here in Melbourne in Box Hill kindergartens and Box Hill schools in the area. There was a huge influx mid-year of children that were first arrivals in Australia. And it was a wonderful thing to be a part of, because the process of Talkieplay was used to integrate children so that they could learn to communicate with their peers and make friends. It was a friend-making machine, and I loved that concept. But we hadn't ever thought that our product was going to be used for children learning English for the first time. We'd thought about the medical approach in terms of language development delay for native English speaking people. So I just hadn't put those assumptions, you know, I'd been very narrow in my assumptions. We then started that's when we opened our product into an app internationally, and we started to see downloads straight away. So we have downloads in Pakistan, India, Egypt was a big market that happened very quickly for us, and Spain. And
were you shipping hardware as well?
No, so internationally we don't ship hardware at the moment. We use a QR code version. So you get full access to all of our games, but you don't get the cute hardware yet. The reason is that registering hardware in each country takes time. And also we then had to patent and put an international patent down, and not just in Australia. And that just takes time. So yeah, software allowed us to reach people to see if that market is viable. And we will reach hardware to them in markets when we can.
Yeah, great. We have a question on revenue generation, which you clearly are right now. Can you tell us a little bit about your funding pathway today?
Oh yeah, funding is huge for a startup because it can make or break you. And I had no idea what I was doing going in. It's not about, for me, it wasn't an opportunity at the beginning to get grants because I was already a researcher in my professional life. So I went in to get commercial funding. So I got pre-seed funding through the accelerator, and that gave me $25,000 in funding, which was really a huge amount at the time. That was more than enough to file my patent costs. I wrote a lot of my patents myself as well, having done a legal course to do that. I then used it for hardware and development, and I didn't pay myself a salary. So salaries are very low down the list. I then used that. We got massive traction and a user base within a 6-month period. So when the company was only maybe 7 or 8 months old, I went in for a seed funding raise. So I raised $750,000 in the first seed funding raise. And that was with all angel investors, and we have some bigger investors as well. It was a big leap, but it's gone very well.
And sorry, you might have mentioned this, but where you had revenue at the point of seed raising, is that right?
No, we were pre-revenue.
All right.
So we had a huge amount of users, but we were for free. So we were just proof of point, handing it out, you know, getting user traction, seeing if it was worthwhile doing it, and got a massive response. So that was, and the only way to take it forward was to really have funding for hardware.
Yeah.
So we did.
That must have been hard to raise that seed fund pre-revenue, so good on you. Was there, I guess, do you have any advice, or was there a particular metric or outcome that you were focused on when you were asking for your seed funding? You know, like, was there either a metric that you wanted to hit prior to seed funding, or a particular milestone that you were really sharply focused on with the seed round?
Yeah, so as a researcher, people might not want to hear this, but I'm very data and numbers person. So I went in with all those metrics thinking, you know, we need to have reached, you know, 1,000 users. We need to have shown that they use it every day, that kind of thing. In the end, the investment really came down to me. The investors invested in me, not in the product. So they invested that I was the right person to bring it to market. That I had the, I guess, I had the ability to keep going when it was going to be tough, that I was passionate about it, and that I could build and lead a team that could bring it to market. I think I was very surprised, but it was a very clever thing to invest in the person and not the product. And I'm really glad that I actually opened myself up and got to know the investors, because it's a relationship that I've built with them. I've flown with one of my investors over to the US. We stayed in a really dingy motel, drank whiskey in this pool while there were sirens going off all around this suburb, and laughed and practiced our pitch decks, and went over numbers and everything. And, you know, an investor isn't separate from me. Our investors are part of the journey. They're passionate. They're with me every part of the journey. And so it makes sense that the numbers weren't everything to them.
Yeah, that's great. We have a question that says, I was wondering how clinicians in the healthcare system who traditionally work with children with language delay have responded to your innovation? Were they curious? Were they skeptical? Have they embraced it? And I think, you know, kind of a follow-on question is like, how does this fit into the larger context? And how did you become part of the system?
Yeah, I was really nervous about that because, you know, I also was very deliberate in the design of our product that in no way should it replace the clinician. You know, I didn't want to produce something on the market where parents thought that they didn't have to see a clinician anymore and that they didn't have to follow up with their child's health. So we had to be very careful with our wording, the way we put it out. In fact, probably to our revenue detriment, but for me, it was the right decision to make because then when we took the product to clinicians, they thought it was fabulous. You know, they were really happy. Their clinics are overloaded. So we're talking over 2 years wait to get language therapy help. And, you know, and I think there was like a sense of relief. Also, they were very interested and had lots of ideas for what we could do next and how we could take it in different directions. And we're still building on that. So we've actually relied on a lot of feedback from clinicians, taking a big breath in the beginning, really scared to show them, and then realizing that actually we're not competing. We're all part of, you know, how we bring the children to the same result in the end, just through different methods, working together, collaborating. Collaborating is key. You know?
Yeah, that's lovely. Can you maybe just tell us about your first sale?
Yes, it was, our first sale was with Good Start Preschool. And it took quite a while for the first sale to get going. So working B2B partners takes a lot longer than B2C. So probably about 7 months of back and forth, signing it off with the CEO. We did a top-down approach and we had a multi-center sign up. And, you know, I thought like a really good sale in the beginning would be a couple of hundred, you know, just to break it through and, you know, but for us, it was in the tens of thousands. So that was a really good way to start.
Yeah, that's great. And a great brand to then build up on other sales.
Yeah, I mean, we are very deliberate with the customers that we pick as well. You know, we want alignment. We pick customers that want us, that see the value. We go with the grain. Yeah. We really respect those that are making big differences in children's lives, and we want to work with them.
That's great. And for my last question, can you tell us about where in the business or when you decided to leave your real job and work on TalkiPlay full time?
Yeah, I think this still pains me, this topic. So I got the fellowship of my dreams in emergency and trauma and left it. And it pains me still, but it was the right decision to do. I picked adventure, I picked the unknown, and I picked where my passion lay. I left in 2019 from that position, so it hasn't been that long, but I didn't leave my position until we were fully funded. So until I had $750,000 in the bank, and I knew that I could build a team and support myself. That was a big jump, but I was really open with the university. They were so excited, but really sorry when I left, and I got beautiful flowers and presents, and I get messages saying, do I want my job back even now in this market, which is just beautiful.
Yeah, well, that must have been a tough 6 to 12 months where you were essentially doing 2 jobs and being a mom and proving your passion in all areas. So well done on making it through it. Well, thank you so much, Annie. That was a really wonderful story. Really appreciate you taking your time to share.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, a little bit out of order, because as I mentioned, she was so kind to take some time out of her day during her all-day strategy meeting, I believe it is, Grace. We have Grace Lethlean from ANDHealth, which is a federally funded program outside of the university that offers commercialization support for digital health companies. Grace.
Hello, thank you. And thank you, everyone. You'll sense here that I'm very excited to be here. But also, if I seem a little flustered, that's because I had the horrible realization that I'm sure you've all had at one point, where you're going to present, you thought, I'll just check my slides. and they're all corrupt. So please bear with any typos or bits and pieces as I've sort of recreated what I really had put some effort into intending to talk to you guys today, because this is my favorite thing to do, which is spread information and help about digital health. So I'll quickly share some slides, and I'll share these afterwards, and I need to take notes or screen grabs that you're welcome to, but I'll share everything with you after this. So basically, I just want to talk to you today about, what is ANDHealth, what is the support that's available both through us and some other channels, and talk to you about our programs, and gives you some case studies of actual companies that have benefited in Australia from this, and also I'd ask to give 2 tips of what you might like to think about, to consider if you're thinking about becoming a digital health company. So that's the agenda. Let me take that away, and I'll try and be as quick as possible and not go over time. But please jump in if I am going over time. So basically, yeah, we're an organisation in Australia which delivers specific commercialization training programs for digital health companies. We work collaboratively with a lot of other support groups across Australia. We're specialised in digital health, and we're non-profit and non-equity taking. We don't take equity in the companies that we assist, and we're not for profit in what we do. So what we sort of do here is the big green box, these training programs is really the core of our business and what we're doing here. But also we run targeted events. You might have seen, like all last week, the last 2 weeks, in running Q&A sessions with the TGA. And that's just something that we want to run to support you, because there's been some changes in regulation. So we run ongoing information sessions and also kind of scheduled programs. We gather a lot of industry data and do half-yearly reports and like snapshots of the industry. So pie charts, you can see if you are in the same space, what's popular, is all the different types of clinical indications, is diabetes growing, is telehealth growing, what sort of markets people are going under. So we publish that periodically, and it's definitely worth checking out, just a snapshot of what's going on in Australia. And we do a lot of advocacy and leadership. So when there's changes to the regulations that might affect us, or when there's new legislative policy changes, we try and get involved there. But as this is a diagram in colour blocks too, like our core business is that green box. It's delivering that support, very specific to connected to digital health. There's some great support programs out there for generic entrepreneurship skills, for financial modelling, how to make your pitch deck amazing, that sort of thing. We're just very specific on digital health. So that's why we say we're collaborative. Please come to multiple programs, and switch what's best for your project. I think what's worth touching on is, what is digital health? And because it can mean a lot of things, different things to different people. And so I'll share a link. This is a paper. It's not very long. It's quite visual, and it has lots of different examples of products that fit under each of these headings. So you can see where you might fit as well. And it's not a legal definition. It's just something to guide our conversation, because everything's digital health, right? From digitizing health records, allowing patients to view data on their mobile phone, making what used to be a pamphlet about pregnancy into an app. That's kind of digital health on that far left-hand side there. It doesn't require clinical evidence. It's just maybe reproducing the guidelines or giving you some information. And they're not a medical device, which is actually defined by the TGA. And I can dive into that with anyone who wants to offline. And they're sort of in the middle, digital medicines. They've got need clinical evidence for what they're doing, and they're trying to have an active outcome on your health. It might be a tool that works with another medical device, or it might be making some mild medical claims. And then all the way on the far right-hand side of therapeutics, there are now software and apps that are prescribed to a patient. They work so well, they've been through RCTs like a drug, and they are now prescribed to be used. And so that's kind of an emerging field, but all fits under this big banner of digital health. So if you're thinking you're in any of those things, then you can get support from ANDHealth. So people are like, how are you funded if you're not for profit? So we are funded by industry, who give us wonderful funding and expertise, and also our program partners. So some of that you see in there is government, state and federal as well. So the programs, how we can support you. On this sort of continuum from I've got an idea all the way through to launching into the market, we have different programs that are tailored to suit different levels of need, of course. So I thought I'd just talk you through the 4 ones kind of in order. So right, ideate, I've got an idea, I want to make sure I'm on the right track. right, innovate, like I've started building it, I've got a proof of concept maybe, and I want to, you know, get a bit deeper in that. A 6-day masterclass where you really need to have a product, and it doesn't need to be in revenue yet. And then an incubate program where we really work intensively with companies who have a product and a sort of at revenue-ish stage, and really work intensively with them to help them grow their product. And we learn so much through all these programs that we like to keep iterating and building it back in to unlock that information so it doesn't sit in the silo of ANDHealth, and keep giving it out as well. So this Ideate program, we just had one 2 weeks ago. They're quite regular, so keep an eye on our website and I'll give you a link at the end. But they're really for, yeah, I've got an idea, and making sure that you're sort of hitting off on the right points, just challenging you on some key things that we see companies struggle with, or new ideas coming out of universities, research clinics, as well as the tech sector, innovators, patients, carers, all sorts of people come to this, and it's sort of real world case studies and advice. And then there's a 3-day version where we take a smaller group and kind of really delve in with them, and they do some like workshops and small group activities and that sort of stuff. So they've usually a bit further along, they've kind of got a proof of principle thingy, but they don't know maybe how they should do their clinical studies, or, you know, how they're going to get someone to pay for it. So you need sort of a bit further along for this one. And this is something we've had hundreds of people go through the program, so I won't make you read endless testimonials, but I think one of the things that we're really proud of is the specificity of the information and the quality of the guest speakers that blue person has identified, and making sure that purple person's point, that people who've really done it. So our philosophy at ANDHealth is if you speak at a program, you have really done that section. So you're not just a generic patent attorney, you're a patent attorney that knows all about software algorithms and how to register them. Or you're not just someone who thinks they'd like to launch a business, but you've actually launched a business in that space you're talking about, or whatever the particular thing is. If you're an investor, you're not just a generic investor, you invest in digital health products. And that's just something that takes a lot of our effort, but that's what we pride ourselves on and we want to bring to you. Then we do this masterclass. Again, too busy a slide, right? I promise you I'd cut it down in my first version, but you can have a copy of this. Basically 12 modules of things that we've learned from the sector that we think are really important to cover. We don't deliver them. I host the day. We normally and we have, I think we had 40 participants last time it was run in November, and like 58 speakers. So again, it's like getting those people who are experts in the space to come and speak with you about their particular expertise. And two of the things that were really popular from that masterclass was customer fair, getting to sit down with customers, you know, US insurers, Australian health insurers, life insurers, government, hospital systems, GP practices, and really talk to them and say, you know, this wasn't a time to actually sell them, wasn't a sales fair. It was getting their input on how you would sell to them in the future. You know, what about your product would need to be interesting to get to them. Again, these are companies a bit further along on that continuum from before, and they actually have something to talk about. So it's not so daunting if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not ready for that. That's okay. We have programs earlier. And the other popular one was the investor feedback, sitting down with an investor in the space, semi-match, so that they knew a bit about your field, because you get, as I said, those things that are like digital therapeutics, really scientific-based prospect clinical trials, and then back into like efficiency gain, doctor billing software, that kind of thing. So making sure that we match that up. People got a lot out of that one-on-one meeting, just really getting them to, we encourage them to kind of be harsh but fair, and really trying to give them some tangible advice on what they could change to make their business more appealing. So from that company, we had one company, again, a bit wordy, but UPage have a hospital employment database. And I think the things here that I thought were interesting was the tangibility that she felt of what she got out of the program. You know, she could walk away with actual, she has some key learnings down there that were things she could change immediately. And also we happened to connect her with her investment meeting, went really well and actually resulted in ongoing follow-up meetings. So we can't guarantee that we'll get you investment in the program, but we can prepare you to be pitching to them really clearly and getting some decent feedback. And in this case, it kind of commercially paid off, which is great. The last program is the ANDHealth Plus program. We take 5 companies a year, work really intensively with them for like 9 months. I'm an ex-engineering project manager, so we project manage you a totally bespoke project. So companies in the past have done US market entry, companies in the past have done clinical trial planning, you know, they're quite different. We have some cash to spend with you, a lot of in kind from the sector. And it's not just like access to 1 hour from so-and-so. This is C-suite execs being on your advisory board and meeting with you every second Monday, and us all agreeing a project plan and sticking to it. It's quite in-depth. Anyway, unsurprisingly, when you take companies that are at that later stage on that continuum and you pour resources into them, you get some pretty good outcomes. So those companies, we've only had 10 so far in our pilot, and those companies have gone on, one's gone on to exit onto the NASDAQ, one's going to raise money, this is including grant money as well. They've started a lot of clinical trials, 39 clinical trials here, but importantly, and what sort of drives me, is they've served over 140,000 patients. And yes, that's them doing it. I'm not serving those patients, but I found it rewarding to know that these companies, when they scale and when they're stable, they're there for their patients. Whereas we've all seen companies collapse and then all their patients are left out to dry. So I find that particularly motivating. The government likes to see us creating these jobs, so that's all good too. And I thought I'd give you 2 quick case studies of those sort of companies that might be relevant maybe to what you're doing. I chose this one because they spun out of university. So Atmo spun out of RMIT. It's a gas capsule, a capsule that measures the gas in your gut in real time to your phone, obviously really useful for diagnosing gut issues. The first question we always get is, do you have to retrieve it? The answer is no, you do not have to retrieve it. It's biodegradable and disposable, etc. Anyway, they're currently in a third round of clinical trials, and when they worked with us, we were helping them with the clinical trial planning, the regulatory strategy, will it be regulated, what level regulated, etc., both in Australia and at the FDA overseas, and like which market they'd go after and how they would enter that market. So that's what that company needed at that time, and that's what we supported them on. Whereas Perks, another Sydney-based company, they needed something really different company. They're an app for medication adherence to help make taking medication fun, in short words. And so they were just 2 Sydney-based entrepreneurs, neither from a health background, both from more of a business background. Really great founder team. And they needed help with US market readiness for their product, or scanning to see how they'd be competitive in the US market. Regulation, they were needing to claim things on their app about what it could deliver around medication adherence and didn't want to overclaim. So we got them some legal advice there on exactly what they're allowed to say. And advice in gathering clinical data. They were on the fence about it, and we said, no, you really need to get some clinical data. And that encouraged them to go on and do multiple peer-reviewed publications, including with the University of Sydney. So that's sort of somewhat an example of back at the beginning there when we had the definition of digital health. And sorry about that. And they were more in the wellness space, probably in the digital health space, just a reminder app with a fun game to remind you taking medication. But because of the evidence they've gathered, they've been able to move across to more of a digital medicine, digital therapeutic, and they can write on their box, using this will help you lower your blood pressure because of medication adherence. I'm making one up, but that's something they can now write thanks to clinical trial data. Yes. So 2 key things we think are really important to consider up front if you're thinking about digital health, thinking about a research project. 2 things you can ask yourself, I think, that are important. One is, am I regulated? At ANDHealth, we think it's really important to be regulated if you can be. It differentiates you from wellness. It could open up reimbursement opportunities. And also it's better for patient safety, obviously, if everyone's trying to comply as opposed to just floating around making whatever claims they want. So the TGA has just released this new flowchart. It says draft in the corner, but it was ratified yesterday. I've just got an old version, sorry, that hasn't changed. And this is really helpful, and I'll send you a link. All the things today I'll send you a link to, and you can work through this and see if you think you're going to be regulated. And then if you still got any questions, there's like a helpline and an email, and they're really, really helpful. They're very proactive about trying to make sure that digital health technologies are understanding how the regulations apply to them. So yeah, I think recommends thinking about that sort of upfront and seeing how that's going to inform how you maybe do your development. And the other thing I think that's a bit of a challenge in digital health that's maybe different to some other sectors like drug development is the tension, is probably the wrong word, but the need to understand and differentiate and please different users and different payers. So these are just some random users, it's not exhaustive, but like patients might be using the product, employees might be using it, corporate wellness might be using your product, a caregiver might be using your product, and so they obviously need to be pleased with the product, or it can't be too much of a hassle to use, right? Or it's never going to get used. It's just kind of any sales technique from any kind of startup program will tell you that. And I think the challenge of digital health is they're often not the payers, and again, this is just an indicative diagram, but hardly ever would an employee pay for the software that they're using. You know, so you need to think, who's going to pay for it, and how can I make sure that they are incentivized, pleased, and see the value in it. So for example, if there was a really great app to lessen the burden on emergency departments, which was like a remote monitoring system, and the onboarding, the nurse at the triage gave you this app and said, go home and monitor things, enter data into this app, whatever, and we'll get in touch with you if things get worse. I mean, this is obviously a fictitious thing, but it could be a really cool product, right? So you need to have the nurse really understanding it. You need to have the patient really appreciating it and being able to use it and finding it usable, but also need to have someone reviewing that data, right? Some dashboard, so there's a doctor or a nurse practitioner at the top there, but then none of them are going to pay for that, right? You don't pay when you take something home from the emergency department. So there's got to be a hospital administrator up there as well who's appreciating it and seeing the value. So working through that is, I think, really important up front, because if you design your product only for one person in that chain, it's never going to be able to help patients. So I think the question to ask yourself is, who cares financially that your system exists? Because if that hospital administrator can never find a budget for it or can never pay for it, then it doesn't really matter how effective it is at that home monitoring. You know, and maybe this is just a made up example, maybe it's not the hospital administrator who should pay, but really thinking about that up front and not thinking, oh, I'll leave commercialization until later, can actually just change what clinical trials you do, how you design your product. And you're not alone, like it's what we're here to help support you with, asking yourself these questions. So I think I'm almost to time, so a quick call to action. I'll just give you a link to that TGA flowchart. Sign up for our newsletter. It's where you hear about opportunities, grants that are open, news, and support programs of ours and others. So I recommend signing up, so that link will take you there. Office hours, you can book a 30-minute convo with me and the team and talk about your specific needs and see how we can support you. That's free, that's just sign up. If you've got a connected device, like a physical connected device, we are really all about the digital software side. So Cicada Innovations there in Sydney, and also University Cities connected to them, are really great for support and run a lot of support programs in that. And also I think do office hours, so do get on, you know, their radar. And then there's other programs as well. MTV Connect is our federal growth centre, federally funded growth centre, and the Ready program has a lot of stuff going on at the moment as well. So definitely worth keeping an eye on those for different sort of support and funding opportunities. Now with us, we have a summer summit coming up. Love to see you there. That is a ticketed event, so please, I'd love to see you. International guest speakers, I think it's a really good lineup, touching on quite a lot of themes, from telehealth to virtual care to investment trends. So yeah, I'd like to see you there. There's a Frank and Fearless Women's Day event. That's a free podcast event on March 11th. Sign up for that as well. And that Bright Innovate program is our next kind of cap off the rank from programs, and that's in April. So if you're in our newsletter, you won't miss it. Look, thank you very much. I hope that's what you were after, and I'm sorry if that felt a bit rushed, but I'm really keen to answer any questions if I can, or just see you at an office hours and I can really answer your questions one-on-one.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks for also pulling that together and how stressful that is. And I know you had a lot going on. You know, I think it's wonderful to have something like ANDHealth who really kind of has that specificity of advice from kind of conception through to scaling. So that's great. I do recommend that you sign up for their newsletters. You know, I'm not in digital health, but I find it a good read. I think it comes out every Friday. So if you sign up soon, you might get today's version. And yeah, they promote things like that TGA Q&A last week. I know a couple of our members attended and found it incredibly valuable. So I'd really encourage you to do that. But actually, speaking of payers, Grace, we have a question on costs of the master classes and the accelerator program. Can you tell us a little bit about the costs? You said the office hours were free.
Sure. So at the moment, our the programs are being funded for you by Ready, which is a MTV Connect backed thing. So they're covering all ticket costs, so it is free. Typically, there is a cost to masterclass. It ends up being like $120 a day, and I think it's definitely good value, but actually you're in luck. Thanks to Ready, there's MTP Connect, they're supporting all tickets. So it's just a selection process. It's a bit competitive. It's really just about hitting the eligibility criteria, and when it's open, and we're going to run it in June, you know, you won't miss it if you're on the newsletter, and you can check all that out, and I can meet with you one-on-one if you want and see that you're eligible. So I hate wasting people's time applying for things that they're not going to get into. Yeah, so that one's free, and then people often ask about the ANDHealth Plus, the like longer term later stage program. That's also free. And again, it's a longer application because it's much more support. And again, you can meet with me and the team for 30 minutes and discuss your application, because we don't want to waste anyone's time, but we'll try and give you other help if you're not a good fit. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Mel and Ben and Annie as well. Thanks for your time. And thank you to